like hanging out with this little beauty. Are we ready? Well, we're broadcasting. Okay. Good job, everybody. So, welcome to our broadcast Sunday service of July 20th. So, welcome all of our friends online. And so, our opening prayer. May our time together this morning be a time of nourishing our mind, heart, and spirit. Let a peaceful wave settle into our hearts, regardless of what is happening in our world or the world around us. And we acknowledge the presence of our angels and guardians that are with us now and always, and receive their guardianship and companionship with awareness and deep gratitude. And may the message today land in our hearts with inspiration and the light of spirit. Amen. Yeah, so I want to welcome Connie up to give the message today.
I'm going to talk to you today about being immortal and infinite. For those of you who may not be familiar with these terms, immortal means living forever, not subject to death. And infinite, having no limits or boundaries in time and space, endless. Can we awaken to the understanding that we are not just a common human being? We are far more than we presently may believe. What we might ask ourselves is, have we forgotten about our true self? Are we like a caterpillar who has gone into a chrysalis before it becomes a butterfly and takes flight? Or like the bear who goes into hibernation in the fall, only to emerge in the spring with 3 offspring to go on a new adventure in life? Both of these creatures have emerged, changed, and ready for a new life experience. We too have been gestating and morph into something else while in our cocoon. Having gone from form to new form over and over for millennia, having gone from birth through transitional stages to old age to death again and again, from an incarnate being to a disincarnate being over and over again. Many have become stuck in this repeating karmic wheel of 3D reality. Now a shifting is occurring in our consciousness, our awareness, and there is a push happening through our evolutionary process to awaken and remember so much more. We are changelings who can morph from 3D form, this human body, into a new 5D form, a new type of body, from a carbon-based body to a crystalline light-based body. That is why many of us are going through some incredible bodily experiences and mind experiences, because this is where we're going. We're morphing, we're changing. At this time, there are those among this human earth race who are completing their earth incarnation and mission work, who are transitioning from their outworn human bodies through a process known as death. Others are finding life here is too harsh and not to their liking, and taking their own life through suicide. There is no judgment on the part of spirit as to how one chooses to leave this life. We may not believe that we have any control over it, but before we ever came here, we made decisions. We worked with our advisory team before we came. It's there, it's in our memory, but it's hidden. It's hidden because It isn't something we want to deal with at the present time. We want to deal with living our lives, but it's there. One of the stories I'd like to relate is from Richard Bach's Illusion. In Richard Bach's book Illusion, there's this reluctant messiah named Don Shimoda. He's given up being the messiah. He's tired of the crowds and the people not really listening to what he has to say. So he becomes a barnstormer, and he meets up with the author of the book and tells him his story. And he works with Richard Bach about learning all kinds of things, like how to walk through a wall, because you're not made up of solid material, you're made out of molecules of light, and how to swim in the earth and things like this, even how to levitate things. And Richard Bach, or whoever the character is, winds up with this wrench pounding on his head in the middle of the night because he's been trying to levitate it. As I say, we are more powerful than we believe. There's evidence that these kind of things truly happen. But when Don Shimoda decides he's through with this incarnation, he decides to go out in a blaze of glory and blows up his plane. And he comes back and he does tell Richard that this is what he chose. He chose this. So, did Christ Jesus perhaps want to make a point by choosing to show people that death could be overcome? Was that part of his message? That you could love yourself enough, know enough about how you could alter yourself, that you could even overcome death? There's more to that story than what's being told in the Bible. It's what I believe. He certainly showed his disciples that was not the end of life. However, if we go back to these entities that came through in the Silver Cord book, they talked about something called the gamble of life. We come down here, and yes, we can experience something unpredicted, unplanned, and suffer a serious injury and die. I'm an avid reader, so I'm going to go to another book. This one is called The Day After Tomorrow. In this story, a young recruit in the Army, he is probably just barely of the age for recruiting at the time, he winds up at a base down in Texas that's in a very hot, desert, dry, dusty place. And they march and they do all of their stuff all summer in this kind of environment. Come fall, and it starts cooling down, and wetness comes, and everybody starts coming down with the flu. So this soldier winds up in the hospital running a fever of 105. Needless to say, he doesn't survive that fever. He dies. But he doesn't really realize that he's dead, even though he looks back down and sees that body, but he doesn't recognize himself. And so he starts wandering around this complex, this hospital complex. And suddenly a being appears to him, a shimmery sort of being, most likely his guardian angel. And he shows him some things about the typical soldier's life, like on leave, going to the bar and getting drunk out of your mind to the point that maybe you even pass out and your friends have to pick you up and take you out. Unfortunately, what he also sees is all of these spiritual beings hanging around these people, just like, ooh, I'd like to have that drink. Ooh, I'd like to have that, smoke a cigarette. And when that person falls down and faints from drinking too much, one of those spirits enters him. Pretty scary stuff. But eventually, he does come back. He does look at that body, and he does go back into that body. Now, that was a different sort of after death experience that was reported. A lot of people see light, they see um, friends, family. A lot of times they're told, though, you aren't finished with life. You need to go back. This young man that I just spoke about, he was a medic. He was training to be a medic. He had begun medical training before he went in the Army. So he was asked to go to a special school and become a medical doctor for the Army. And his train was to leave in just a few days. Needless to say, he was unable to make that train. But later, it was offered to him, and he did go, and he became a medical doctor, not only for the Army for a short period of time, but also in his outer life. Another book that I recently discovered in our library and have read, I still have it at home, but I'll bring it back. In this particular book called Dialogue on Awakening, that was written by Tom and Linda Carpenter, Tom is channeling an entity that simply wants to be called the Christ. And he did have an incarnation in which he was here on earth as the man Jesus. Tom's wife Linda is recording the conversational dialogues when a question is posed, and Tom asks the question and then hears the answer and relays it. In chapter 8, which is the physical experience, the question posed is, I don't understand why, if you describe that this life is a dream of our oversoul, why do we have to experience death? He wanted to know. The Christ answers, in a word, it is not necessary. Does that surprise you? It is only your acceptance of it which makes it appear apparently so. If you should at any moment absolutely discard the very firm belief that you hold, which says, I was born, I will die, you would no longer experience death. There is no beginning. There is no end. Isn't that what we believe about God? Do we not believe that we are part of God? There is no beginning. There is no end to us either. Indeed, you had no problem with this. Christ goes on, if indeed you had no problem with this, you would never die. One way of looking at this is, I believe, is that it's like putting on a new set of clothing and going on a new adventure. Tom asks, has anyone else besides you done this? And the answer was yes. Many of those that we consider masters were able to do this as well. How do they do it? You have to master the little ego mind and start listening to that higher spiritual mind of yourself. You have to learn how to connect to that. And you have to clear out the closet, as Reverend Jay used to tell us, clear out those beliefs, those thoughts that keep you held down. In a book study group I did a couple of years ago with some of the ladies here at church, we studied Deepak Chopra, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind, in which he presented this same idea that we are ageless, we are timeless, we are forever. That's a great affirmation to use. When I used it on a real regular basis, people were coming up to me in my store and saying, what kind of lotion are you using? You look so much younger. What are you doing? That was what I was doing. It's time to go back to it again. Yes. One of the stories that I was also exposed to about this idea was from the entity Ramtha that comes through J.Z. Knight. He explains that he lived over 2,000 years ago, and he was a Lemurian, and his father was killed, and his mother and he and his sister were captured by the Atlanteans. And they were forced into slavery, more or less. And his mother had to prostitute herself, and eventually she was killed, and so was his sister. And he became so incredibly angry about this and the fact that he was forced to work so hard that he decided he was going to go talk to God about this. So he climbs up this mountain and he shakes his fist at God. Why do you allow this? And an angel appears with a big, broad sword and gives it to him and says, go out into the world. And he goes down and he starts showing them about justice. And he gets a huge following, and they travel all the way into what is now known as India, into Indus. And in the process of going there and battling, Ramtha is run through with a sword, and he's lying on these paving stones in a courtyard, watching his blood flowing out of his life, when again the angel appears with the sword, and she says to him, you must take up your sword. You are not finished with life. So for 7 long years, he's at the mercy of the women of the camp who put all these nasty smelling ointments and things on him. And he sits on a rock for 7 years. And he begins to, watching the people, notice that the women's hair was blowing in the wind, and the wind would play with the leaves in the trees and the grasses. And he thought to himself, I want to become like the wind. I want to be that free. And he found himself thinking this very strongly and wanting this very strongly. And he became like the wind and found he could take his consciousness and even his embodiment to places like the far side of the moon. When he came back and got well enough, he told the people they could do the same thing. He stood on the banks of the river and talked to them. But they were so happy to at last be through with battling and have a home and have animals and crops that none of them wished to listen. But then Ramtha just simply disappeared, and he went to the Pleiades. He came back to tell J.Z. Knight, the time has come to cross over the bridge. It rather frightened her, but he came and he talked. And we had some friends that gave us some, not CDs, but VS tapes. And we had lots of people through our house this summer watching him. And I came to the conclusion at one point where I felt like he was looking right into my eyes. This being was Christ at be. There are other people I've read about that were able to do this as well, like Annalise Guerin that I've mentioned before. One of the major fears around death humans hold, one of the major fears around death that humans hold is that it will be painful. The Christ says that pain begins with fears held in the mind. I believe one of the biggest challenges human beings face in life is dealing with this fear of death. There is such a belief in the idea that it entails suffering, great pain, sickness before dying, and deterioration. Does it have to? I know I have. If when you experience these sensations of pain, of suffering, of, oh my gosh, I must have this or that, and you run to the doctor and all of that, that you truly create that. We create with our minds. We are co-creators. We are now in the Aquarian age, the age of mind. It is time to start learning how to work that Binford 5000, as I called it. Take it out of that corner of your workshop and work with it. You know, I know that this can work because I've worked with it myself. I'm not always successful, but I know that we can overcome many, many aches, pains, and discomforts simply by not giving them power. Don't go down that rabbit hole of memory. Oh my gosh, I have this going on. It must be this ailment. When we label things, we give them power. But we are the one that's supposed to be in power. But boy, the little ego self doesn't want us to know that. It wants us to go down that rabbit hole. The Christ says that God asks not for suffering. He doesn't want us to suffer. He, she, it, the is, the all that it is, doesn't want us to suffer. When pain is understood, he goes on to say, as beginning in the mind and faced by relieving it in some physical manner, when you choose to relieve your pain in some physical manner, be it an aspirin, an operation, a massage, acupuncture, acupressure, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's okay to use crutches until we can truly walk. But keep working on being able to walk. What do you think this big surge of Reiki in our environment is about? It's about learning about the mind being able to overcome that ego self that tells us we can't. Our body was designed to regenerate over and over again, everything to regenerate. What happens? We interfere with it. That was one of the things I learned way back when I took my herbal training, that the body knows how to be well. It's time to recalibrate, go back to the original blueprint, and become more than we think we are. You know, another book I remember reading was Dune. In Dune, there was a sentence that stuck with me. Fear is the little death. Why doesn't that go to what Christ is telling us here? Yeah. Moving now to a passage given by Eric Butterworth in the book The Flow of Life, he presents this explanation of the morphic way of looking at the poem, saying, even though I walk through the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And he puts emphasis on that valley. Even though I walk through the valley, he says the valley isn't open-ended. You know, you go down into this valley and it's open-ended. And so therefore, like that, life flows through. Life throws through like the valley. The darkness that occurs when night falls within the valley gives way to the light in the morning. Of course, you know, in the old westerns, there was the thing of the blind canyon where they tried to push the bad guys into, or the bad guys had tried to push them into it. Those are our blockages. We don't want to be in a blind canyon. We want to let life flow in, through, and as us. For that is Creator's experience of its creation. Butterworth also gives two ways that people look at death. The first person may loudly bemoan the death. This is the end. My life is over. Or the other person just keeps on going through. Oh, okay, I have a little pain today. I can keep going. They keep going and going. Reverend Don used to always say, and still does to this day, when he ends a conversation, well, I guess we just keep on keeping on. Reverend Jay had a story about wanting to live to be 100 years old so that he could get that letter from the presidents that rewarded him and tell him he didn't have to pay Social Security anymore. But Reverend Jay also had another wonderful story. It was about some of the women in the church that he ministered in New York. They so strongly believed that they had control over their lives, that they, when the time came, could simply say, out the light. Well, Reverend Jay had tea with one of these particular ladies one afternoon, and then he receives a phone call that she's in the hospital dying. When he goes to her, she says, well, the time has come. It's time for out the light. And very soon that afternoon, she passed. These women, Reverend Jay told his congregants about, knew they were infinite beings dwelling for a time in a human body. They had been like the caterpillar, devouring life in their early years. Then they went through adolescence to adult to elder, and then knowing at some level it was time to cocoon for change to take place, they created the chrysalis, the old age. This is where the magic of the cellular metamorphosis took place. And out of that hardened old shell of their earthly body emerged with the declaration, out the light. They became like the butterfly, a being of light, which they had always been, because it never dies. We're a little long today, so I'm not going to go into a lengthy meditation with you, but just remember to use that affirmation, I am immortal. I am forever. I am an infinite being. Because we are. We just need to wake up and remember. All right. It's time for our offering now. I find it interesting. There's always a pin up here that drops on the floor. So take your offering, whatever it may be, in your heart or in your hands, and let's give it a blessing. We bless this energy that it may go forth and to help support our beautiful, wonderful center here. And then on outward from here to others, and eventually circles back unto us, giving us all that we need, want, and desire. And so it is. With gratitude, we say thank you. I'm going to invite Reverend Madge up now. She's going to complete our service today.
All right. Thank you so much. So I want to share with you something that's from one of our own congregants. He's not here today. John Scoville wrote this and gave it to me some time ago. And when I was looking for a little inspirational piece, I went to this book. It's called To Bless the Space Between Us. It's a lovely book. But in the front of it, I had this piece that John wrote. And I thought, oh, that's why I went to the book. I went for this. And it's lovely. It's called Body and Soul. Do you think the soul is contained within the body? Well, maybe. Maybe that's why I feel so constrained, just a piece of me that moves without dreams. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the body that is contained within the limitless soul, the boundless spirit, ready to leap, to take action, to give a new form to the moment, with the freedom only a soul can dream. John Scofield. Isn't that great? Man, I just love that. I loved it when he gave it to me, and um, I still enjoy it. You got the same book there? Yeah, it's a lovely little book. Well, for our closing prayer and to close out our broadcast, we will today, as we close our service on this beautiful Sunday morning, may our hearts be open with love and connection. May we rejoice with the knowing and comfort that we are eternal beings. Carry the light in your heart into the days and weeks to come to comfort us in those difficult moments that we all have from time to time. And may we be instruments of love, peace, harmony, and oneness. And so it is. Amen. Yeah. So we close out our broadcast. Thank you all for being with us this afternoon or this morning or whenever you're viewing the broadcast, and many blessings. Okay. So